Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my standard review of the brand new Viltrox Autofocus 24mm F1.8 lens, and this is for Sony full frame E-mount, or FE. And so we have an f1.8 lens at 24mm, a wide angle, very versatile, important focal length, and it's going to run you a little over $400. And so certainly, some value there if the lens leads up to its potential. Now, I was happy to see them going back to developing full frame mirrorless, because actually the very first Viltrox lens that I reviewed almost exactly 2 years ago was a wide angle 20mm f1.8 full frame lens for Sony E-mount, or FE. But at that point it was, they were just getting started, and it was probably larger and heavier than what it needed to be. It was manual focus only, no electronics, all that typical thing that you'd expect from a brand new lens maker. But they have really rapidly progressed in the last couple of years, and very quickly they switched from manual focus to autofocus, and all of their more recent lens releases have all been autofocus. And part of that has been enabled because they did a smart thing. From very early on, they embedded in the actual lens mount a USB port that would allow you to put firmware updates, simply right into the lens, software electronics itself. And so that has enabled them to essentially tweak autofocus on the fly. And so I've seen a lot of progression over that time, and certainly a lot of good things there that we'll discuss as a part of today's review. Now, if you want even more information, I recommend that you check out the definitive review, as we're going to hit the highlights here today. So first of all, let's talk about the build of this lens. As I noted with that first 20mm f1.8 that I reviewed, it was nearly double the weight of this lens, much larger, and I think that Viltrox has learned some really valuable lessons in the last couple of years. They went to a newer design that, while it's still metal, as it is in this case, it's more lightweight alloys, and so as a byproduct, we have a lens that gives you a wide focal length and a wide angle of view, but comes in at a very reasonable size and weight. The lens weighs only 340 grams, which is certainly, for the quality of construction, that's a fairly lightweight lens. And the lens is 70 millimeters in diameter, giving us a 55 millimeter front filter thread, all in metal and those threads, and then the length is 85 millimeters, and so making it quite similar in size to the Sony FE 20mm f1.8 G lens, a lens that I love in terms of both its performance but also in the form factor. And so this, I think, is a great size, and it fits beautifully onto the lens, looks great mounted on there, and so I think that certainly is a plus. Now, what's missing here is that there is no weather sealing at this point, though they do have a coating on the front similar to a flooring coating that is moisture resistant and also resistant to fingerprints, making it easy to clean. And so, it's maybe a step in the right direction, though I'd love to see them integrate weather sealing into their future designs. There also is not any kind of switches on the barrel, so no AF/MF switch, but what you do have, first of all, is you have a aperture ring, kind of a dual approach to aperture, to where you can either select your various aperture settings manually, or you can switch into an automatic mode and control from within the camera. In this case, there aren't detents, and so if you do want to aperture rack, you can do so, though note this is an aperture by wire, and so it's not quite as precise, in my opinion, as a fully mechanical, declicked aperture mechanism. What you also have is a very wide and beautifully ribbed, all in metal here, but beautifully ribbed focus ring, which actually is quite a treat to manually focus. It has a nice precision, very good weight. It is, I would say the focus throw is about right. And then also, because it does have full electronics here, you do, if you have focus assist turned on, you actually do automatically get the magnification of the active focus area, which helps to visually confirm focus. So a very good result, I think, in all of those things. One thing that I will note, however, and it kind of ties both into the handling and then also into the image quality, is that at this stage, this lens does not have in-camera support for either JPEGs or video. And so that's one thing I certainly miss. There is a correction profile that you can get from Viltrox. I'll have a link to it in the description down below that you need to manually install into Adobe Camera Raw, Lightroom, whatever. And but what it does allow you to do is it does do correction profile for either JPEGs or RAWs in software, but not in camera. And so anyway, it's a workaround that works for getting a good end result, but it's not as convenient for those of you that are JPEG shooters for getting corrections in camera. I'm hoping that that will be something that we'll see in the future. Maybe even, I don't know if a firmware update could enable that in the future. So this lens is equipped with an STM, or a stepping motor, and as noted, Viltrox has done a great job of kind of learning the ropes on the fly here. It's not first party great yet, but I can just see a lot of maturation in their quality of focus. And so this stepping motor is very quiet, it is very fast, and as far as stills goes, it is very, very precise as well. I got great results. I basically have no hesitations, no criticisms. I was able to get good quality of focus if I was shooting out in the field and just highlighting individual objects at f1.8. As you can see from these results, I had good results using PET AF, in photographing my cat, and then of course in grabbing a human eye. And so very good results for stills. For video, a slightly mixed bag. And first of all, let's detail one of the positives. Focus pulls tend to be definitely very smooth, but quite quiet and fairly confident. Let's take a look. So the good news there, of course, is that that focus noise is quiet enough that that was basically a silent environment. So if you have any kind of typical noise, you're not going to hear any kind of focus, even for your onboard microphone. And I had the gain turned up fairly high to pick up on things like that. And so I don't think you'll have a problem there. Also, we saw a good smoothness of focus pulls. What I did note is that there is a little bit of a slowdown in getting to the destination to make sure that focus is locked. Not a bad thing necessarily, because what it did eliminate is any kind of pulsing at the end or settling as it arrived at the destination. There is also minimal focus breathing, as you can see there, so that's perhaps a useful thing for you if you are a video shooter. Where it isn't as good as first party, and I could see the biggest difference, is when I was using it for filming and for something like this. It actually did quite a good job is if I was facing the camera and, and kind of my face was in view, and I didn't get too demonstrative with my hands, which if you follow this channel, you know that I tend to be a engaged speaker, we'll put it kindly. And so when I got more demonstrative and my hands were moving around, it would distract focus sometimes. And so I would see a shift away from my face. However, it never got stuck. It always moved back to my face. And so if I was evaluating this lens a year and a half ago, I would consider that to be a fantastic performance. Face tracking has gotten a lot better in the last couple of years, and so I think it's maybe just lagging a little bit behind the curve of where the best first-party lenses, or say the new Tamron zooms that tend to they have access to, I think, focus algorithms, and so they perform like Sony lenses. So I would say that it's just slightly behind that curve, but overall, I mean, not a whole lot to complain about, and particularly if you're just doing stills. Autofocus was on par with anything else that I have seen or evaluated in terms of this focal length. Finally, let's talk image quality. I mentioned earlier about that correction profile. You're going to want to have that. The amount of distortion is actually not bad. And if you're shooting anything outside of something with very, very straight lines, you probably won't notice any distortion at all. There's a small amount of barrel distortion, but the problem with it is that it's a fairly complex pattern. There's a bulge in the center, but it doesn't just kind of move linearly out to the edges, but there's a bulge, a dip, and then a little bit of a rise towards the edges. We call that a mustache pattern. It's hard to just pull something on a slider to correct that, and so having the profile is kind of of essential to getting straighter lines. There's also a significant amount of vignette, at least 3.5 stops. I had to max out, trying to correct for it manually, had to max out the sliders to try to correct for it. So both of those things, not great necessarily. And particularly when it comes to the vignette, as you can see here, if you don't correct it, if you're shooting in snowy environments like me, it's very, very noticeable. And so you'll definitely want to get that profile. You will want to correct for that vignette. Now, beyond that, other aberrations are actually quite well controlled. There is basically no lateral chromatic aberrations around the edges of the frame, and so great job there. There's only minimal amounts of longitudinal chromatic aberrations that I only was able to detect in 1 or 2 images. And in other situations like this shot where there's a graduation of snow on a branch, often you'll see fringing on the snow on the outer line. There's very little of it there. And so overall, I think those aberrations are quite well controlled. Also well controlled is fairly well controlled is flare resistance. And so, even in trying to shoot for it, I only got minimal amounts of either veiling, loss of contrast, or any kind of ghosting artifact. And in this shot where I was just, shooting a shot where the sun happened to be in the frame, there's basically no damage to the image. I wasn't trying to torture test, just use it more normally, and I didn't have any damage there. And here you can see panning across, first wide open, that, there's very little to complain about wide open. Stop down, there are a few positions where you get that kind of ghosting artifact up at the top part of the frame, but again, it's minimal. I don't think that's going to be destructive at all. So they've done a good job in that metric as well. So all of this means that contrast is pretty good. And so as you can see, a wide open f1.8, we have fairly good center results, some drop off definitely to mid frame, and then a fairly equal performance from mid frame into the corner. And so it's still pretty good considering that this is a 42 megapixel A7R3 and you're close to 200% magnification as you're looking at it there. Stopping down to F2, you only get a very minimal bump of contrast, a little bit more significant at F2.8, a little more at F4, at F5.6. You have excellent results all the way across the frame, right into the very corners. And so that allows you to get, good, crisp, detailed results at landscape apertures. And if you're composing even wide open in kind of the sweet spot of the frame, as you can see, you actually have quite good detail here on these dried leaves and a fairly nice looking defocused background. So at the end of the day, this is a lens that is certainly a welcome addition. I really love, say, the 20mm f1.8 G lens. It's a fantastic lens, and I would say it's definitely higher performing than this lens. It's also, more than twice as much. And of course, at 24mm, the G Master is a fantastic lens, but it's more like 3 times as much. So let's call this a poor man's G Master, in that while it's not as good at any of the things that the G Master does, it can do most of the same kinds of things and at a third of the price. And obviously that's going to make it very attractive for those of you that are on a limited budget, want this focal length, want a little bit wider maximum aperture, but also, don't want to break the bank to purchase it. And so I think that Viltrox has found a sweet spot for this particular lens right here. If you want more information, feel free to check out the link in the description to my full text review. There's also linkage there to an image gallery if you want to check out more photos or look at them a little bit longer. Beyond that, there is also links there to purchase one, though it is brand new, and so some of those links are not fully populated as of yet. Also, link is to follow me on social media, to become a patron, to sign up for my newsletter that comes out every Thursday. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button and make sure to click to get notifications when new content drops. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and let the light in.